Buenas noches. Para esta reunión tenemos disponible tanto como el chat como la función de preguntas y respuestas. Si tiene una pregunta que le gustaría que le haga en su nombre, escríbela y le gustaría que le haga en su nombre y escríbela en las preguntas y las respuestas, por favor. Si desea hablar, utilice el icono y levantar la mano. Lo llamaremos y le activamos en el silencio. Esta noche tenemos el honor de dar la bienvenida a la senadora Monique Limón y el asambleísta Gregg Hart. LIV se orgullece de convocar esta asamblea pública y brindar la oportunidad de nuestra comunidad de escuchar la senadora Limón y la asamblea el señor Hart.
I'll start by sharing a little bit about LEAP's vision for the work we do. LEAP mitigates the effects of poverty, racism, and trauma by providing high-quality, trauma-informed childcare, comprehensive, culturally sensitive family support, and visionary community leadership. We are dedicated to narrowing the achievement gap by addressing structural and generational poverty, racism, and trauma. Our Children's Center provides a loving space for children between the ages of 6 weeks and 5 years old. Our focus on early childhood education prepares all children to be ready for school. Ana.
Nuestro Centro de Recursos Familiares en el Old Town Goleta responde de la manera proactiva de las necesidades de los miembros de la comunidad a través de las clases, recursos y referencias y apoyo directo. Nuestro Recursos Familiares fortalece a las familias brindando clase para padres, foros de migración y clases de educación financiera. Nuestro equipo de asistentes apoya a las familias para que logren sus objetivos, ya sea acceder a beneficios de salud a través del medical o cobertura de California, otra vez en su currículo o recibir beneficios de alimento a través de CalFresh o de distribución de comida. LEAP también alberga el único banco de pañales en el condado de Santa Bárbara y vemos de primera mano los desafíos que enfrentan las familias en nuestra región.
One exciting thing about tonight that you've probably already noticed is that this bilingual webinar is truly in both English and Spanish. And if you are monolingual, you are having the benefit of hearing through an interpreter. So it's an experiment for all of us. And I hope you will give us grace and patience as we switch between myself and Anna and between Senator Limón and Assemblymember Hart. And one more thing before we get started. I'd like to invite each of you to learn more about LEAP at our LEAP Awards on February 29th, LEAP Day. The LEAP Awards are free and virtual, and Senator Limón was our honoree in 2022. This year, we are honoring Katja Armistead and Kristen Miller. And Kara is posting the link in the chat for you to RSVP. Again, it's free, and I hope you will come. So now let's get started. Senator Limón and Assemblymember Hart, we want to start by having each of you introduce yourselves to the community. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to get into politics? And we'll start first with Senator Limón and then move on to Gregg Hart, and then we'll switch with the next question.
Thank you, Lori, and gracias a todos por estar aquí esta tarde, esta noche que estamos aquí. I got into politics really as an accident. I'm someone who was born and raised in this very district that I now have the honor to represent. And my work at the university with the K through 12 schools really inspired me to think about the policy issues that impact the families. For many years, for 14 years, I spent time working with students and families directly, helping them prepare college applications, complete the FAFSA, apply to graduate school. I read essays, I visited homes, and it was through all of that work and working with our students and families in the communities that I realized that there were many more things that we could do to help our community and a lot of other policy areas in addition to education, where a student lived, whether or not they had housing, healthcare available for the family, whether someone had a job or did not have a job. All of these things impacted the community. And that got me involved with nonprofit organizations, and nonprofit organizations led to the school board. And I've spent the last, I'm just starting my 8th year in the California State Legislature. So my work has really been grounded on the experiences that I've had right here in this community.
Assemblymember Hart.
Thank you, Lori. It is really an honor to be here tonight. Senator Limón and I literally got off a plane about 30 minutes ago, and it is really a pleasure to have an amazing mentor like Senator Limón to help me. I'm a new member of the State Assembly. I was only elected a year ago, but I'm not new to the community like Monique. I grew up here in Santa Barbara, went to local schools, UCSB and Santa Barbara City College. My father was the library director for the city and county of Santa Barbara, and my mom was an educator at local schools. So our family had a great tradition about public service. And I think that my chosen career path is kind of a reflection of that. 40 years ago, I was a college student at UCSB, and I got connected with a young public high school teacher down in Oxnard named Jack O'Connell, who was running for the state assembly in an unlikely race. And he was successful. And I ended up getting hired right out of college to work with him. And in that first campaign, where it was really a grassroots effort, a lot of young energy, daunting odds against somebody who was very powerful and had a big name. But the gritty young candidate won. And it really demonstrated to me that politics was accessible to everyone, and that by getting engaged and working hard, you can make a difference for our community. And I'm just so proud that decades later, I have the opportunity to serve our wonderful community as your state assemblyman. My district includes all of Santa Barbara County and a little bit of South San Luis Obispo County. And I am constantly amazed and reflective on how lucky we are all to live in this beautiful part of the state of California.
Okay. Gracias, la asambleísta Hart y la senadora Limón. La siguiente pregunta. Cuéntanos un poco cómo es ser senador estatal y representante asambleísta estatal, cuáles son sus responsabilidades y qué poderes tienen. Esta vez escucharemos primero del asambleísta Hart y luego la senadora Limón.
My job as your assembly member is to represent the interests of our district in our state government. And Monique and I both do this by introducing and voting on bills that impact our region, advocating for our community in the state legislature, trying to help bring resources from the state budget to our community, and helping residents receive assistance on issues that they have with state government. This last year, I was proud to author 8 bills that were signed into law by Governor Newsom, and I just want to highlight 3 of them briefly. The first one has to do with nonprofit organizations like LEAP that serve our community. In the current law, or the previous law, was that nonprofit organizations had to do work for the community and then wait to get reimbursed from the state of California when they had a contract or a state grant. And that put a lot of stress and pressure on these community organizations to effectively loan money to the state of California for a period of time and wait to get reimbursed. My legislation now allows nonprofit organizations to get up to 25% of the contractor grant in advance to help them bridge that, that budget issue. And I think it will ultimately result in more nonprofit organizations that are grassroots at the local level, being able to serve a more diverse population in the state of California. So I'm really pleased with that bill. Another piece of legislation I had to do with oil development. California has an antiquated system for regulating oil operations. The penalties for violators of public health and safety rules are not significant enough to get companies to follow the law. So it was time to upgrade those regulations and bring them into the 21st century by putting the penalties at a level that would really discourage folks from violating the law and help protect public health and safety in community levels through having the right way to regulate these industries. Another bill that was really important for consumers prevents unscrupulous real estate practices that had begun to occur in California and across the country, where folks would go to homeowners and offer a very small amount of money, about $500, in exchange for a very long-term real estate agreement, as much as 30 years in some instances. And the contract that was enforced by that loan was a lien on your home. So people had their home equity at jeopardy by the terms of this contract in a very unbalanced, unfair way. The state attorney general came to me and said, we think this is a terrible practice that should be illegal in the state of California. So I put together a bill that was successfully signed by Governor Newsom that will protect homeowners from this unscrupulous business practice. So those are just 3 things that I've been working on, and I'm proud of the work that we're doing together in the state legislature.
Bueno, para la comunidad, nosotros como representantes estatales, el asambleísta Gregg Hart y yo tenemos ciertas responsabilidades para que son representar a ustedes en la legislatura del estado de California. Hay 40 senadores estatales aquí en este estado y hay 80 asambleístas, así que los 120 legisladores que están en el estado de California, los representamos a ustedes como comunidad. Una de las cosas que hacemos es tenemos la oportunidad de votar a favor o contra las proposiciones que se hacen de varios temas, ya sea educación, salud, vivienda, el medio ambiente. Y también tenemos la responsabilidad de crear proposiciones y leyes que representan esta comunidad. Así que el asambleísta Hart habló poquito sobre algunas de las leyes que él ha sido autor. Yo también he sido autor de varias leyes, incluyendo leyes que protegen el medio ambiente, que aseguran oportunidades para nuestros estudiantes para que puedan seguir estudiando en el colegio, en la universidad. También he proporcionado leyes en el tema de salud. He proporcionado leyes que ayudan a reducir los costos para la salud y las medicinas, especialmente medicinas que ayudamos o que ayudan para el cáncer. Así que esa es otra de las responsabilidades que tenemos. Y la tercera responsabilidad que tenemos es también ayudar a nuestra comunidad a navegar a las varias agencias estatales. Así que si hay individuales que tienen problemas, por ejemplo, con el DMV o con el Departamento de Impuestos, nuestras oficinas ayudan directamente a asegurar que la comunidad tenga la información, las respuestas para todos los temas o cualquier pregunta que tengan. Así que ese es el trabajo de los legisladores que representan a ustedes en el estado de California.
Thank you so much. I see a few people have joined since we started. So I want to remind you that if you are not a bilingual person, there's a globe icon on the bottom of your screen, and you will need to select the language you prefer. I have selected English, and so I heard beautiful interpretation of Senator Limon's remarks. I also want to acknowledge that I'm seeing raised hands and questions in the Q&A. We have a few prepared questions, and then we're going to open it up. We surveyed our attendees when you registered, and most of the questions centered around childcare and housing. Those are clearly the top concerns of this community. They're not the only questions, and we will get to the others. But let's start with childcare. First, let me say how grateful we are for the work both of you have done to elevate childcare in the California budget. We appreciate the work you're doing to maintain the progress we've made in funding childcare for California families. We received questions about paying a living wage to childcare workers while keeping childcare affordable for families, and about how can the state support the establishment of new childcare facilities. Can each of you speak about your work on childcare in the Senate and Assembly, and how the legislature is working to support families as well as providers? And Senator Limón, we'll start with you this time.
Thank you. Well, childcare is a very important issue. As a mom of a toddler, I've been living in the childcare space for a few years now. And what we have done in the legislature has really been built on a number of things. As part of the Women's Caucus, we have fought really for 2 decades now to increase the number of childcare spots in the state. And we've been able to do that since I've been in the legislature by 200,000 spots. So that is very meaningful for our state. We still have a lot more to go. The need for our state is about 1.1 million slots of childcare. So 200,000 is a great start. But one of the things that I also did in 2019 was I moved forward a bill to make sure that our childcare workers were able to work together in a union and to really, become the profession and create a strength in the profession that they have. So that has been something that has been really meaningful to our state. Oftentimes, we know that the issue isn't just childcare spots. It's also whether we have people who can serve as our childcare providers. And so we see that really, really present here in Santa Barbara County. It is a very important issue. If 2 things don't happen, you don't have a working economy. You must have childcare and you must have schools open. So this has been a very important issue. While the Women's Caucus has very much championed the issue, it's been really an economic issue for our entire legislature. And we've all been very committed to increasing the number of childcare slots, to increasing reimbursement rates, to ensuring that we do rate reform for what we pay our childcare workers, and to really think about how we're going to generate the next generation of childcare workers in our state. We know that it is key for people to go to work, and so we'll continue to work on that.
I have a unique perspective on this issue because for 20 years, I owned and operated a childcare center with my family. Started off as a small family daycare in our home, and the siblings of the original 6 kids came and joined, and then we had 12 children and outgrew our home. We ended up opening up a center in downtown Santa Barbara that ultimately served about 48 children and is currently operated by Storyteller Children's Center, continuing in operation ever since we began it. And I'm very proud of that. It gives me a really deep understanding of the challenges of the professionals who are involved in early childhood education and how important it is for childcare to support families in our community. It is really a heroic job that our childcare providers do every day. And it is a role that brings together every member of the family and the providers to take care of the youngest and most important members of our community, our children. Lack of access to affordable childcare, as Senator Limón described, doesn't just impact the development of our kids, it also forces families to relocate from our community and stifles economic advancement. It is a huge issue, and I'm really proud of the progress that the legislature has made in this issue area last year. We passed a budget with a record investment in childcare, allowing for approximately 20% increase in pay for state-funded childcare providers. That was long overdue. The legislature also provided additional funding for training and retirement benefits for our state-funded childcare workforce. An investment in our workforce is an investment in additional childcare spots, as Senator Limón mentioned. The state is also in the process of supporting the ramp up for transitional kindergarten to be offered to all 4-year-olds by 2025. This is an incredibly ambitious effort that has its challenges, but we're working through those with the ultimate goal of every California child who's 4 years old having an option for public preschool. That will be a tremendous benefit to children and families alike. This year, sadly, it looks like we're going to have a significant budget shortfall, and I pledge to work diligently with my colleagues to protect the progress that we are making in expanding access to childcare and early education.
Gracias a los dos. Recibimos muchas preguntas sobre vivienda. Nuestras familias están preocupadas por el aumento de los alquileres, los desalojos. Una persona escribió: estoy preocupada por tantas caras las rentas de las casas. Si yo pudiera comprarme mi casa con ese dinero que pago, mi renta me la compraría. Y que las rentas de California parecen que van subiendo. Otra persona pregunta: ¿cómo puedo hacer que se reduzca la renta, ya que me aumentaron $150? Antes pagaba $1,750. Derechos que tiene uno como inquilino. ¿Qué información sobre viviendas de bajos recursos para familias y mayores? Entonces, mi pregunta es: ¿qué iniciativas legislativas se están considerando o pendientes actualmente para abordar la crisis de vivienda en California? ¿Cómo contribuir estas medidas a aliviar los desafíos que enfrenta nuestra comunidad en términos de vivienda asequible, falta de vivienda, disponible general de vivienda?
Well, I couldn't agree more that housing is the top of mind concern of everyone that I speak to in the state of California. It has become a crisis, and I think it helps to sort of put in perspective how difficult it is, as the person who asked the question described, for a working family to afford to buy a home in California. Back in 1990, the median household income in our state was $60,000. And at that same time, the median home price was $250,000. So it took about 4 times a family income to buy a house. More than 30 years later, the median household income has only increased to $85,000 from $60,000. But the median home price has increased to nearly $800,000, which is 10 times the annual income of the average homeowner or prospective owner. The same story can be told with rental prices. Prices have gone up much faster than wages. Not too long ago, I was in line at a grocery store, and the checker was checking out the customers, said that she was not from Santa Barbara or Goleta or even Carpinteria and Ventura. She lived down in the Los Angeles area, and the grocery store was paying her to come up to stay in a hotel and pay her time and a half to cover the shifts at the grocery store, which is just unsustainable and an obvious indication of how desperate our housing crisis is, because this grocery store can't get employees to cover the shift. The state is working hard to address this issue. We're now requiring all cities and counties to make policy changes that can accommodate significant increases in housing, especially affordable housing and housing for our workforce. The county and all of our local cities are completing this process right now. And in addition to promoting responsible development of more housing, the state is working to help renters directly. I was proud to support legislation that limits the amount that landlords can require in security deposits to 1 month's rent. Previously, landlords were able to charge up to 3 months rent for somebody to get into a home, which was incredibly difficult to accumulate with our high rental prices. I'm also proud to support legislation that protects tenants and prevents abuses of the eviction process. This bill ensures that landlords are not unfairly evicting vulnerable tenants during rent evictions, owner move-ins, or withdrawal of the property from the market. And I'll continue to work with Senator Limón and my other colleagues to identify additional tools that can help renters as this legislation continues. Housing is such a critical issue for our community. It's going to take all of us to be involved. Advocacy from community members is a critical part to make significant impact in meeting our community's housing needs.
Bueno, también nosotros, el asambleísta Gregg Hart y yo hemos trabajado bastante en este tema y sabemos que las viviendas el tema de vivienda y el costo de vivienda es algo que es muy importante para toda nuestra comunidad. En los últimos años hemos pasado diferentes medidas y propuestas sobre este tema. Una la pasamos hace algunos años, la AB 1482, que es un tipo de control de renta estatal y protección para los inquilinos. Lo que hace es que tiene límites en el aumento que se puede hacer para la renta. También este último año hemos pasado propuestas y lo que hicimos fue pasar una propuesta en cual las protecciones del desalojo son unas más estrictas para los inquilinos. Así que los propietarios deben proporcionar cierto tipo de prueba si van a remodelar o a mudarse. Así que estas son ejemplos del tipo de legislación que hemos pasado en el estado de California. Hemos hecho varias otras cosas, pero también hemos tratado de avanzar mucho, como dijo el asambleísta Gregg Hart, avanzar que tengamos y que tengamos la oportunidad de construir más vivienda. Tenemos los temas y de inquilinos, pero también estamos tratando de aumentar la construcción para viviendas en todo el estado de California. Al nivel local y en el condado también, la ciudad de Santa Bárbara y el condado están trabajando en medidas y controles para los alquilinos. Y también allí estamos viendo que ellos están pasando al nivel local diferentes propuestas para asegurar que las personas tengan oportunidad de quedarse en sus casas y rentando. Así que también queremos que sepan que localmente tenemos recurso local. El sindicato de inquilinos de Santa Bárbara es una organización que también está aquí proviendo información y que cualquier persona puede participar en esto para no solo recibir información, sino que también hacer preguntas sobre cómo se puede navegar algunas de las situaciones que se han mencionado esta noche.
Thank you. We have one more pre-prepared question, and then we're going to open it up. I'll start. LEAP is a proud recipient of Stop the Hate funds from the California Department of Social Services. And we're using these funds to provide resources to victims of hate crimes and hate incidences, as well as to do prevention work by bringing together our multicultural community. Recently, there have been anti-immigrant attacks downtown, anti-Semitic incidents in Isla Vista and on the UCSB campus and on the Mesa, and anti-Black incidents in our schools. Our work at LEAP in partnership with the other Stop the Hate grantees is vital not only to providing services to victims, but in building bridges of understanding and relationship so that we can prevent hate in the first place. The Stop the Hate grant expires in 2026. How can the legislature continue to support anti-hate work across the state? What would you like to see happening in your district? And we will start with Senator Limón.
Thank you. And that is something that we're seeing all over our community at this time. We really are seeing an increase in hate and demonstrations in disregard. And I think it has caused issues. As a former school board member, certainly, we watched some of this arise in our schools, and we know that it came from a place of the community. Nothing shows up in our schools that isn't already happening in our community. And so for us, I think that, you know, being part of the legislature to establish the grant, I think is very, very key. That is something that I'm proud that we did, that I was part of the legislature in ensuring that we have funds. Additionally, what we have done, you know, in this spirit, is not just work with schools, not just create implementation and programs and curriculum, but work, as you've said, with nonprofits. These funds have gone specifically to nonprofits in our community to ensure that we create the support programs, not just at the state level, but also at the community and the local level. Our response to hate, to discrimination, is not something that only comes from the state of California. It comes from working together and also understanding that there are local solutions, that there are local options to how we address the issues of discrimination in this community and every community. I know that we will continue to champion this. We will continue to do our best, even in a difficult budget year, to ensure that these funds remain. We were successful in getting them last year, and I think that we'll continue to do the same in helping. Now, it is a different budget year. It is definitely difficult, but we still understand that discrimination and that hate are prevalent in the communities where we live, and we want to help our communities be able to solve for that. And we want to be able to provide not just resources, again, but be able to ensure that we create a framework where people know where to turn to find some of these solutions and how to create a space that disseminates the discrimination.
I'm inspired by the author Ibram Kendi, who writes about how it's not enough for us to be not racists. It's critical for us to be anti-racist. This same thought applies to how we deal with other types of oppression and discrimination. The Stop the Hate program exists to provide support and services to victims and survivors of hate incidents and hate crimes, and to prevent these incidents from occurring in the first place. In addition to looking at future opportunities to fund this work, we need to understand the lessons that are being learned through this grant program and create systemic changes to how incidents of hate are addressed by our public institutions. This includes making changes to address how hate is prevented and responded to in the education, law enforcement, healthcare, and social services systems, in addition to others. I'm committed to being an ally in this work Too many Californians and too many members of our local community are impacted by hateful sentiments and actions. We must continue to act on this issue. I'm very proud of the work that I did as a member of the Santa Barbara County Supervisors to establish a racial justice initiative and a funding mechanism that continues to this day, that generates about $500,000 of funding that's available for local community nonprofit organizations who are doing important work in this space. And it is innovative. It involves nonprofits in our community on trying to find new strategies that can really get at the issues that we're dealing with, that reinforce an anti-racist strategy. And I know that my colleagues in the state legislature, Senator Limón, and everyone that I work with in Sacramento is tremendously committed to this cause, to ensure that all Californians can live a life without experiencing the trauma of being the victims of hate.
Thank you. We are now going to start by pulling from some of the Q&A. Anna will read a question or two, and then we'll go live, and I see people are raising their hands. So we're all going to hang in there together and do our best to get through as many questions as we possibly can.
Well, you want me to ask a question in Spanish? Esa pregunta es para la senadora Limón. Oh, sorry, that's in English. I can't answer that one. Okay. Yo soy mamá foster y la vivienda es importante porque el dueño que me ve con mis niños o jóvenes en la casa nos subió la renta al 3,500.
¿Esa es la pregunta?
Nada más que ella quería compartir
Compartir.
que
Y
le
es-
subieron la renta.
Sí, y nosotros en el estado de California hemos pasado una propuesta que no deja que la renta suba más del 5% por año. Lo que hicimos durante los años de COVID es que tuvimos una pausa en ese aumento. Para nosotros era muy importante porque estábamos viendo exactamente ese ejemplo que se acaba de dar, lo estábamos viendo en otras partes del estado, que lo que estaba pasando es que la renta estaba aumentando a un porcentaje muy alto. Así que para nosotros ese es un tema muy importante. Estamos tratando de asegurar que tengamos opciones para los inquilinos y también asegurar que las opciones sean unas en cual aseguren o tengan la vivienda disponible. Así que esa es una cosa que nosotros vemos como algún problema que tenemos nosotros. Sabemos que hay personas, ¿verdad?, que no rentan la vivienda a esos precios, pero lo que hemos oído en toda la comunidad es que el costo de renta y el costo de vida está muy alto ahorita. Así que esa es una de las cosas en la cual estamos trabajando.
Gracias.
Yeah, and I would just add that the challenge we have is that we have not built enough housing for the people that live here. For the past 40 years in the city of Santa Barbara, there was not a single apartment building built to serve the needs of thousands of residents who were living in Santa Barbara. That has turned around, and we have begun now, after a long delay, too long a delay, to begin to build more apartments that will help in the long term to balance supply with the needs of renters. That was controversial at first, but I think there is a growing sense of support for those efforts, and the state is really pushing local governments to do more quickly so that we can have more affordable housing units built and more market rate rentals to help balance supply and demand. And it's really going to take all of us working together, not just the state of California, but all the local governments in Santa Barbara County to permit those new housing developments and enable working families to find a place to rent that they can afford in their budget.
I'm going to follow up because we have a question in the Q&A, and also this came in recently this week about the housing element. And this question comes from Paulina, and she says, is there anything you can do to give communities more control over their housing element? Can the builder's remedy be sunsetted now or retroactively? Can we stop builder's remedy in other high density housing being in historical landmark and high fire evacuation areas? Can the median income be changed so that communities can create the types of housing they need? And I will add as an editorial that I also have received the opposite question, which is, how can we make sure that we build more high density housing and we create more housing available at all levels and all economic levels, from very low to median to high? So I'll let you take those questions together or separately, and then we'll switch to another topic. And whoever wants to go first can hop in.
Well, I will say that your question alone articulates the challenge that we have in California. We have a challenge where there is a need for more housing. Where, how, and how much we build are all part of the very much the debate that we're having, not just locally and at the state level. We are a legislature of 120 legislators, and the laws that have been passed in a very bipartisan way around housing. And this is where we are at. Certainly I know that, Assemblymember Gregg Hart and I share the concern about high fire areas, and have some sensitivity in understanding that we have to think about the areas, slightly different. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, the democratic process that we have in this state really is a majority of the vote. And so as far as reversing some of the laws, I can, I'll speak candidly that I'm not sure that there is a majority that would vote to reverse, whether it's the housing elements or the builder's remedy. And I think that it doesn't mean that those, of us that represent communities where you hear both sides of it, where you hear multiple sides, I don't actually think it's just two sides to this, are not trying to at least create or influence laws that think about the differences in 58 counties and over 480 cities. Housing will not look the same in all places, but we all do recognize that we do need more housing. And so this is indeed part of the challenge we have as a state legislature that we try to tackle on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I would just add that the builder's remedy process, which probably not everyone fully understands, is a very, very limited number of units that I have a very short shelf life. There was a moment in time when the state asked local governments to put forward their plans to build additional housing. And while the local governments in our county were working on that process, a window was opened to allow developers to build projects that might not have been approved otherwise. It was sort of an inducement to encourage our local governments to be as fast as possible in approving the new housing elements and the new zoning that is required by the state of California. But those projects are the rare exceptions and really are only responsible for a very small number of units. The decisions that are made at the local level about where the housing is going to be is an entirely local decision. It is up to each of those cities in the county to determine where those sites should be. The local governments do have to provide the zoning for the number of units that are being specified by the state of California, because each community in our state has a responsibility to provide the housing for the residents that live here. And things had gotten tremendously out of balance where folks who support our community, do the work of the community, could no longer afford to live here. And so we're trying to reverse that. It's going to take time, and the efforts that are underway are the beginnings of that process. But at the local standards and the quality that is required for construction isn't eliminated by this process. It is accelerated. And I think it's long overdue, and it's something that increasingly I think local residents understand is necessary, and are wanting to be able to provide the housing that we need for our neighbors.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Anna to read some of the comments in the Q&A, because they reflect the pain so much of our community is experiencing with housing. And though there's not a question, I think this is a good opportunity for some of our attendees to be heard. So Anna, if you could give a sample in people's own words of what they're sharing.
Yes. Yo estaba buscando un lugar donde vivir en Santa Bárbara o Goleta. En todos los lugares metí aplicaciones. La renta de un apartamento de 2 recámaras va de $3,500 al mes. Más de $5,000 a veces. Somos una familia de 4 personas y 2 adultos y 2 niños. Actualmente decidimos movernos a otra ciudad porque aquí ya no podemos pagar esa cantidad. Ok. ¿Cómo podría ser si el arrendador de una casa no paga la renta, pero los inquilinos sí pagamos? ¿Cómo podríamos proceder con la persona que corresponde? Esas son las preguntas que tienen en el chat y me mandaron unas por teléfono. Lori, ¿se las puedo leer? Okay.
I think that gives a flavor of what the challenges are. Rent going up. I'm going to switch to healthcare because we have a question from Elizabeth on covered California premiums. The premiums have increased and many Californians cannot afford the premiums. What is the state proposing to make health insurance affordable?
You know, I think all of these questions are getting to the concern that so many Californians have about the cost of living going up. It's not just housing, it's not just healthcare, it's gas prices, it's energy prices. You know, it's across the board stress on family budgets of working families. And this is a constant concern that Senator Limón and I hear about when we're out in the community. And it is very powerful to hear these individual stories of, you know, people in trying to get health insurance, homeowners trying to get even coverage of any kind. And I don't have a direct, simple answer to these things. All of these issues are connected. And but I can assure you that we understand these problems and are working hard to find solutions. And one example of that is the area of gas prices. Last year, Governor Newsom led an effort to prevent oil companies from gouging prices for California consumers for gasoline prices. If you remember, about a year and a half ago in the fall, gas prices spiked up to almost $7 a gallon, inexplicably, while prices in other states were not going up And at the same time, the price of gas per barrel on the world markets was declining. And that seemed to all of us that this was an opportunity for oil companies, who there are very few of them in California, to rip off California consumers. And Governor Newsom led an effort to create legislation that will prevent that from happening in the future. We have a new process where oil companies have to give transparent information about their pricing structure and their operations with their refineries, with an eye toward creating regulations that would prevent them from taking advantage of consumers through manipulation of the market. The state auditor is also looking into gas price spike increases. There was a similar thing to gas prices that happened with natural gas prices. So we're well aware of the tension and the difficulties that families are having making ends meet. And we're trying, issue by issue to provide solutions to make things better. But these are complicated, difficult issues that will take time to improve.
And I'll just add that, the state did something very, very big to increase access. When it comes to healthcare, we work in two spaces: increasing access to healthcare and also ensuring that the costs are down. And so those are two different elements that we try to address as a state legislature. And I'm very proud that as of January 1st, 2024, we've expanded Medi-Cal in our state for more individuals. And that, I think, is very, very meaningful. Medi-Cal is one of our subsidized healthcare programs. And it actually is a benefit to all in our community because it saves money by ensuring that the care is at a medical site as opposed to an emergency room. And that's something that we have seen is very, very real. As far as premiums, we are always working as premiums. As some of you may know, Covered California is part of a bigger system of care, including at the national level. So we work very closely with our federal legislators and individuals there to ensure that we have the cost contained in such a way that it becomes affordable, that people can actually use the programs that we have in place. So these are very real issues, and we will continue to tackle premium issues in the ways that we best see can. But I also want to ensure folks that for us, when we think of healthcare and what we need to do to ensure that it's more affordable, we also tie that to access to healthcare. Do we have enough doctors, nurses, medical professionals, specialists, hospitals, OBGYNs, you name it, right, in our community, and also what that quality of care is. So we will continue to work on that. And again, just an emphasis that our medical system in California is not a standalone system for our state. It is closely tied to the federal government as well. It is a partnership in terms of how we provide subsidized care in the state.
Thank you. I'm going to take some questions from the folks who have their hands raised. And I'll start with Gina Quiros, who I'm going to allow you to, looks like someone has brought you in. So go ahead, Gina.
Hello, Assemblymember Mr. Hart and Senator Limón. My name is Gina Quiros. I am a native of Goleta, but I was also chronically homeless for 6 years in Santa Barbara County. Something to think about is the criminalization of being homeless, the basic sleeping on sidewalk ordinances that we currently have, the encampment sweeps, all that. It's very traumatic to those of us who are homeless, and it's a waste. It seems kind of like we're spending millions. I do sit on the continuum of care as well, to make affordable housing, but then we have the downside of people for just barely existing. We're getting cited, some because there's so many citations, they get taken in jail. We're tying up the justice system with stuff like that, and none of it ends their homelessness.
Thank you, Gina, for those comments. And certainly we agree that there is not, we don't want to criminalize homelessness. And, you know, what I will reassure you is that over the last 5 years, the state of California has invested $20 billion in our local communities to ensure that there are more options for the unhoused. There are also issues that are not directly tied to the state legislature. And some of you may be following some of the court cases that are headed up to the Supreme Court on this very issue. But we understand that it is not a crime to be someone who is unhoused. And so we are sensitive to that. We want to work on ensuring that our community finds options. And so I'm proud that the state over the last 5 years has been able to make really meaningful investments. It's never enough to solve a problem, especially a chronic problem in our state, but it is, I think, you know, a testament to how important this issue is for us.
Yeah, and I would only add at the local level, there's been tremendous progress, most recently with the partnership with Dignity Moves to provide tiny homes for folks who are unhoused and to get people indoors, and then provide the supportive services to keep them on track and to regain control of their lives. The secret sauce in this system is to have these tiny homes that are very much more affordable than permanent supportive housing. The county, I think, has about 300 of these units in place now and is working on more. They're the first attempt at this was begun out in Isla Vista and then expanded to Lompoc and then downtown Santa Barbara and most recently up in Santa Maria. And the success is remarkable, you know, getting folks out indoors, away from the trauma of living on the street, getting them the drug and alcohol rehab services and mental health services and job training services that they need to get their lives back on track has proven results. And these facilities are incredibly well managed. We're really fortunate to have Good Samaritan shelters here in Santa Barbara County providing management of these facilities. And they do a wonderful job and with compassion and care. And there are many opportunities for community members to volunteer to assist this effort. And I think we are frankly leading the state in the development of these tiny homes and moving very, very quickly to provide more housing opportunities for people who are unhoused in Santa Barbara County.
Thank you. We will have a question from Maria Valeriano, and then we'll go back to the written Q&A. So if you are someone who has another question, go ahead and put it in the Q&A and we will get to it. But meanwhile, Maria.
Buenas noches. Mi nombre es María Valeriano. Mi pregunta es para todos los servicios que uno quiere calificar. Yo soy de clase media, soy madre de 2 hijos, soy viuda. He querido calificar para, como un ejemplo, estampillas, fustanos. No califico porque siempre se fijan en el gross y realmente ese dinero no llevamos a casa, llevamos otro dinero después de las deducciones. ¿Qué se podría hacer algo ahí? No sé si podrían implementar algo para que nos ayudaran más a nosotros de clase media, que no se fijaran en el gross, sino realmente lo que llevamos a casa.
Bueno, gracias María por la pregunta. Nosotros no tenemos control directo sobre la calificación. Hay algunas calificaciones de impuestos y de sueldos que vienen del gobierno federal y nosotros trabajamos con esos números. También lo que hacen es que toman esos números del estado de California, de todos los condados y las ciudades. Lo que sí podemos hacer nosotros, el asambleísta Gregg Hart y yo, es trabajar, si gustas hablarnos o comunicar contigo, para ver si hay programas específicamente. No sé si serían los mismos programas que están diseñados para los que son de bajos recursos, pero sí hay otros programas, así que nosotros estaríamos contentos de poder trabajar contigo y puedes hablarnos o mandar correo electrónico específicamente. Y esa es otra oportunidad para todos los que están aquí hoy, es que sepan que las dos oficinas del asambleísta Gregg Hart y la mía pueden ayudarlos individualmente. Y si hablan a nuestras oficinas, nosotros nos comunicamos con ustedes y aseguramos si tienen preguntas o problemas o cualquier cosa con un departamento estatal, nosotros podemos ayudarlos en esa área. Así que la invitación está allí para, ¿verdad?, comunicarse con nuestras oficinas, y me parece que el equipo de nosotros ahorita está poniendo la información de cada uno de nosotros en la cajita del chat.
Yes, and I'm really proud of the joint office that Senator Limón and I have opened in Santa Maria. So there is one-stop shopping available in North County now to come and get the assistance of both of our teams. And as Senator Limón described, we can really help people who are struggling with the state bureaucracy. We have offices individually in South County and Santa Barbara, and then we have the joint office up in Santa Maria. And of course, we're always available by email and phone, and we have a staff and a team of folks who know how to cut through the red tape of the state, and try and get assistance for a variety of problems. And we would love to be helpful.
Thank you. And if you can see it, there is information on how to contact Senator Limon's office by phone or by email. And I also want to share that if you need support with applying for Medi-Cal or CalFresh, our Family Resource Center is available to help as well. I'm going to shift over to one of the questions in the Q&A, and this is about childcare and TK. Kale asks, what is being done at the state level to ensure that TK programs are developmentally appropriate, meaning play and relationship based with appropriate expectations for behavior and development, and that they're a focus for children's social emotional development, which is the foundation for all future learning. Not requiring 4-year-old children to sit for long periods and receive instruction with limited access to play and outdoor time and limited access to bathrooms. And I see Senator Limón nodding because I suspect she is living this at home. So Senator Limón, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, I am living this. And so look, I think that when the state established transitional kindergarten, we did a rollout process. And so that rollout process allows for school districts to use their transition up till 2025. So we are not going to see TK fully implemented until 2025. And I represent 34 school districts. And all 34 school districts are doing it slightly different. And we have heard that these challenges exist. And I can tell you that last year there was a very, very concentrated effort to work with the Department of Education on behalf of legislators to address this very issue. The age appropriateness of classrooms, of space, the bathroom issue came up quite significantly. Additionally, what came up was the fact that, for a lot of teachers, that have been in our K through 12 schools and are now seeing the TK, they didn't necessarily have, they weren't quite prepared for even, the bathroom situation. Like I've heard from teachers over and over, right, of like the number of kids that have accidents and you have to help them go to the bathroom. And so we are working very diligently as a state to try to address this, but also understanding that we're not going to see TK fully implemented at least for another year. With the state budget constraints this year, there's been a lot of questions on whether we will extend that or not. But this is something that I feel very deeply and strongly about. And, I'm sure Assemblymember Hart, with his decades of experience in childcare, that age appropriate education spaces and learning is really key to the success of all levels of education, but certainly TK. So just know that TK is something that is on our radar. It wasn't something that we just rolled out. We've had direct impact and say and involvement with the Department of Education on these very, very issues.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's so thoughtful and it's obviously very informed. And as Senator Limón described, we're not done yet. That we have the same goal. We want to get to the place that the questioner wants us to be, but it's important to remember how significant this change is and how we're going from, the state-funded and private preschool model to a public transitional kindergarten model. The facilities, that were built to take care of our K through 12 kids are not the right facilities for this population. We're going to have to evolve those over time. It's going to take significant investment to build age-appropriate classrooms. But in the meantime, we're going to have to all kind of, have some patience and work closely with the local school districts to try and provide the best childcare, a quality childcare by trained professionals that we can provide here locally. It's a challenge to get teachers that have experience in early childhood education. We need to increase our training and increase the pipeline of credentialed teachers who can do this work. There's a lot of challenges ahead, but I'm inspired and excited about the prospect that at a point in the future, we're going to have the opportunity for every 4-year-old in the state of California to have publicly funded, available transitional kindergarten, which is really an incredible achievement and something that all of us aspire to.
We received a question prior to the event, which is near and dear to my heart, and it really combines the issues of childcare and housing. And that is, when we build new housing, is there a way to make sure that we provide for childcare in the housing? As a childcare provider, I can tell you, we would be eager to open up another center. We are opening one in Lompoc, but we would happily do more. And there is just not enough sites that are licensed for childcare. We know we need housing, and there was a housing element, and it looks like more housing is going to be built. How can we make this a win-win and put childcare centers in housing developments?
Well, I'm happy to start. Look, there was an effort, that I ran last year. It didn't actually make it to Assemblymember Gregg Hart, but I think Assemblymember Gregg Hart was the co-author on this, which was a child care tax credit when we are building and creating child care centers in our community and specifically with businesses. And so it didn't get out of the Senate Appropriations Committee this year because it had a very high cost, but certainly we think that that is one of the incentives that we could find, really trying to identify where you can create more spaces for licensed childcare and how we would be able to perhaps give a tax incentive. I think giving a tax incentive in a year with a bad budget is not going to probably match. We will have to wait till a different year, but I know that this is something that came directly from this community. And so we introduced that. As remember, Gregg Hart and I worked on that last year. We introduced it, it didn't get out, but I know that our Congress member actually followed and introduced the similar law at the federal level because we are really trying to figure out how we champion that collectively.
Yeah, Senator Limón did a great job of describing the work going on at the state level. Locally, there's some really important work that has been successful. And Goleta City Council member James Kiriakou deserves a lot of credit for working aggressively for a very long time to encourage local developers who are building commercial spaces and housing projects to include childcare centers in their buildings. And there's a number of successes that have recently happened and I know he has more in the pipeline. I think when we finally get some of those projects built and demonstrate how successful they can be, you're going to see more developers interested in providing those facilities, because it makes perfect sense to have childcare located on site where people live. So I'm encouraged. I think there's more opportunities. I'd encourage everyone who's interested in being a childcare provider in our community and is looking for space to connect with the City Council member Kiriako and learn about what he's been able to do, help support that work, and then encourage that at all the local governments in Santa Barbara County as part of their mechanisms to address the state requirements under the housing element. If we can build these projects in at the beginning, we're going to be really making the right investment for the future.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to switch gears because we cannot have a town hall in Santa Barbara County without talking about the environment and climate. So it's going to be a broad question. It's inspired by Jeff's question about asking for examples about how you're protecting the climate. But let's talk about how we protect our environment as a whole. Climate, ocean, our beautiful landscape, and how do we create more opportunities for children and families to enjoy this beautiful environment we're lucky enough to live in. Senator Hart, I'm sorry, I promoted you. Assemblymember Hart, would you like to start for this one?
Sure, there's so much that we can talk about. California is leading the country and in many respects leading the world in combating climate change. You know, we are committed to making the investments in renewable energy and investing in the rollout of electric vehicles. I think more than 25% of the new cars that are sold in California today are electric vehicles. We are shifting to renewable energy sources here in Santa Barbara County. Maybe just a month ago, the new wind farm up in Lompoc came online and is generating renewable electricity for 36,000 homes in our county. There are many things on the horizon, and in every aspect of that, the state legislature is very actively involved. Governor Newsom is incredibly committed to this issue. We're really fortunate to have had the legacy of former Governor Brown, who was really leading the way. And I think there are just so many opportunities for great jobs and a clean environment. You know, we could start with, you know, the transition in our own county from a fossil fuel offshore oil development mentality to renewable energy that's occurring on lands and solar farms and rooftop solar in so many different ways. The community choice energy programs that the city of Santa Barbara and the county of Santa Barbara and all the incorporated cities that are participating in that effort, providing clean and green energy to our homes. There's just so many things that we can talk about, but I think we are making tremendous progress. There are serious challenges ahead. You know, our antiquated grid needs to be upgraded to make sure that the renewable energy that we're generating can get to customers. That's going to require, you know, streamlining of our regulatory processes to make sure that the transmission lines and the distribution lines are available to get that power to our homes and our businesses. But there is no lack of commitment in the state legislature and state government as a whole. Senator Limón and I are deeply involved in these issues and are champions because our community expects us to be leaders in this space.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think just to add on to that, you know, very proud of the work that we've done collectively to try to ensure that we have clean air, clean water, uncontaminated soil, and on a lot of different fronts. I'm also proud, you know, of the work that we've done in the state to ensure that we have the opportunity for our community, especially members of our community who may not have had historically the chance to be out in the outdoors. And so I was proud to author AB 209 a few years back, which created the Outdoor Equity Grant, and many nonprofit organizations right here in this community have applied for that and have been successful in increasing the opportunities to be in the outdoors. What I learned being a school board member is that if you don't have a relationship with the outdoors, And that is not something that is part of your everyday experience. You really, how you think about the policy issues is slightly different. For so many in our communities, the only, backyard or front yard they will ever have is a public space, a public park. And so I think of how important that is to ensure that we have these spaces for the health and well-being of our community, but also to think about how we create an understanding of what it's going to take to deal with the impacts of climate, to protect our environment. So those are all very, very key things. All of you will have the opportunity to weigh in to some California legislation this year. I was proud to work with Senator Lena Gonzalez from Long Beach on ensuring that we have what we call setbacks. The ability to have a space between fossil fuel production and schools, hospitals, health facilities. And so that's something that all of you will be able to weigh in. The legislature passed this in both houses. And now it's being contested, and that's something that you all will have the opportunity to decide if that's something you believe should be part of our thinking and how we think about the impacts of climate change, our environment, but also our health in the future.
Thank you. I'm going to give you both just, we're getting toward the end of our time. So you've gotten to see and hear from our community, and they've gotten to hear from you. Is there anything as you reflect on tonight, something you want to wrap up with or share with the folks here?
Well, I'll start and let Monique finish. One of the things I think we're both very proud of is the creation of the Central Coast Caucus. It's Santa Barbara is only, we only have 2 legislators that represent our county in Sacramento, Senator Limón and myself. And there are 80 members of the Assembly, and there are another 40 members of the state Senate. So our voice is very small by itself. We are ferocious and aggressive advocates for our interests, but the number of legislators that live in the Los Angeles and the San Francisco Bay Area is much larger than here in our county. So recognizing that, Senator Limón and I worked with our colleagues that represent the Central Coast area between San Francisco and Los Angeles, and have created a caucus of 10 assembly members and senators that will help focus attention on our part of the state. We have unique issues, we have tremendous resources, and we have a vibrant agricultural, high-tech community that many people in the state of California don't recognize. We're not on the major transit corridors in the state, and it's becoming very apparent that this caucus is going to make a difference by raising the visibility of our community in Sacramento, having colleagues come and visit us here, understand our issues, and be more sensitive to the unique challenges that our communities present when we're talking about major statewide issues. So it's, things like that where Senator Limón and I are working really closely and collaboratively and thinking outside the box and trying in every way we can to make sure that we represent our community as best we can in Sacramento and deliver results, bring resources back to our community, connect people with the state government and the services that they want to access, and really try to be allies and advocates for our community. It's a big job, but our teamwork and the way we work together is, I think, going to be really beneficial to our community.
Absolutely. And I think that, the challenges that we have in the state of California, or even local in our local community, are ones that we care deeply about. We are representatives of this community, and we work as closely together, not just with each other, but also with our other local agencies to try to address some of these challenges. I can tell you that the desire and the grit to kind of get all the work done is there. But some of these challenges are challenges that will take, more time and to try to address. We are a very big state of nearly 40 million people. And so change doesn't always come overnight, but certainly it is something that we wake up every day and try to determine what is it that we can do this day. I've learned in the state legislature that at times I may not be able to see the change happen in a full loaf, but if I can win a slice of that change, it is a win for our community, and it makes and it creates progress. So I'm grateful that this community has been involved, has been engaged. And again, know that, you know, at the end of the day, you have two representatives at the state legislature that, you know, were born and raised here, that know this community, that have a responsibility to this community, that have accountability to this community, and understand the unique needs of our community, of the Central Coast, who have a history, right, of knowing this. And so with all the challenges that come, we also do believe that your voice is really, really key. We've done this town hall and it's exciting. It's a great opportunity, but the conversation doesn't need to stop there. You have an open door to reach out to us, to connect with us, to ask us questions about our job, about the bills that are going through the legislature, to see and review some of that work that we do. That is something that you have the ability to do. Our teams have been excellent tonight. They have actually given you all of our information so that you can get a hold of us. And it is, you know, these are big districts, but know that you have resources available to you. So whether it's about the laws or the bills, or whether it's about the everyday problems or navigating a certain state agency, we are happy to try to help you and also connect you. Because we work so closely with other elected officials, with other government offices, if it is not our issue, we will let you know and let you know who to contact at the city, at the county, at the Department of EDD. So we're happy to be able to do that for you, and just know that we're really all in this together as a community.
Thank you so much. We're at time. I just want to thank you both for joining us this evening. I hope both of you and everyone who is still on the webinar will join us for our LEAP Awards on February 29th, online via Zoom at 4 o'clock. Ana, you want to close us out?
Bueno, gracias a todos por asistir esta noche. Liv está disponible si tiene más preguntas. También le enviaremos una encuesta para darles el seguimiento. Por favor, revise su correo electrónico. Recuerde que se registren para los premios del LEAD el 29 de febrero. Y que tengan una bonita noche y gracias por asistir.
Thank you, Lori, and the whole LEAP team.